Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and today I'm thrilled to be talking about the wonderful documentary Will and Harper with director Josh Greenbaum, along with producers Chris Leggett and Rafael Marmor, who also run Delirio Films together. And starting off, I wanted to ask you, Josh, about telling this story because it sounds like from the offset, when Will and Harper first had a conversation about potentially filming this road trip and this journey together, that it was always incredibly important to Will that the film was protective of Harper, and it was something that she felt really comfortable with throughout the process. And in coming on board as a director, I was really interested in how you continued to approach it, making sure that whatever story was being told on screen, that it was always something that felt super protective of Harper's story and was always something being told in the way that she wanted to voice her journey.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think it starts from a very kind of familial place in that I have, as does Rafi, but I have a pre-existing relationship with both Will and Harper. And so at a minimum, it was really helpful that we have a bond prior to working on this. Sometimes I work on a documentary and I have no relationship with my subjects. This case, I think part of the reason why it made sense for me was also I know Will and Harper were fans of the documentary work that I've done, but also we have a friendship and we have a relationship. And I think through that as a baseline for creating a very, very safe environment for Harper and Will to feel as though, they could have cameras following them around for, 24 hours a day for 17 or 18 days and feel safe and feel that they could trust who was behind the camera, not only in terms of making sure the experience and the process of filming felt safe, but of course on the back end, feeling like protected in terms of how this thing is put together, how it's edited, et cetera. So, always a really, really critical part. I often look at any documentary as it's really a relationship between the director and the subjects. Sometimes that relationship can be contentious in an expose, and sometimes it can be, a celebration or a friendship in a way that I think our film is. And so that was very much from the get go. Certainly conversations I had with Rafi and Will and Harper about, which was this very starting conversation about how do we make sure this is a safe space for all of us involved.
I really love that. And Rafi and Chris, you both have a really extensive history with Josh, and you've worked with him before as a filmmaker. And it sounds like across the board in this project that there were a lot of long-standing relationships that really lent themselves to the way that this story was told on screen. And I was interested for both of you as producers with your company coming on board to this project, how you feel like that really enhanced this type of story.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that this one is unique in certainly our experience, just that my wife who's another producer on the movie, Jessica Elbaum, is Will Ferrell's partner in Gloria Sanchez. So the way that this kicked off from Will having the idea, telling it to Jessica, who mentioned it to me over dinner one night, and they don't do documentaries. So, and, it's something we've been doing now for, I don't know, 16, 17 years. It just immediately, it just rang very true that this was going to be something incredible, and something that we could do and we could really pull off. And then, it did from the beginning kind of have this real family feel, from obviously the real family of Jessica and myself, but also, yeah, me and Chris have been working with Josh. I think our first movie was like, we started filming it probably in 2010 or so. And since that time, that was a movie called The Short Game. That was Netflix's first ever original. So again, there's another kind of family aspect to it. That's really what kicked off all of Netflix's, all of their original documentaries. This was the first one. So there's kind of that origin story too. But we did, 7 more between films and series with Josh, with, Delirio, with me and Chris and Josh, over that time. And really, kind of, that's another kind of close friendship / almost family feeling. Like between the three of us, we have such a shorthand. We just know each other's instincts. We know, how to deal with each other in a very kind of straightforward and honest way. We kind of creatively trust each other in a very special way. So, I think all of that really helped with what we were able to achieve, in this movie, which, is definitely, it was very ambitious, what I think we were trying to do.
And I'd add, I think it's, working with Josh over these last 14 years, one of the things that always is really fun about the experience, and I think comes with being really close, is there's an ability to constantly push the format of docs. Like none of our docs are at all the same. And I think this idea of seeing this friendship and seeing it in the lens of two people in a car through and the conversations, like it's a very unique way to hear intimate conversations as opposed to prompted and sit down interviews. And I think the best way to push forward and break boundaries, or push boundaries, if you will, in docs, is to create a safe space, even from the filmmaking side. And again, that closeness with Josh to hear his ideas and continue to push him forward.
Right. And I think one of the things that's really striking about this film is how intimate it feels in terms of the conversations that we get to see Will and Harper having throughout. But there are a couple of moments where the film kind of pulls back to the larger societal conversation around the trans community. And, so we see the world beyond just this friendship. And I think it's important to look at both of those lenses. And I was curious for all of you how you worked to find those moments of, we really want to just focus on the intimacy between Will and Harper and their relationship and these conversations, but then also the moments where it felt important to remind the audience of a lot of that public discourse and the reason that Harper might feel apprehensive going into a bar without Will first.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that was a huge part of the balance of the edit, but we also just kind of followed what happened in the real world and in our experience. And so in a lot of ways we did set out, we knew, I said, I don't want this to feel like a political film. This is a friendship film. It certainly has, we're certainly looking at the issue, of trans people in America and at present day, but really at its core, it's a story of friendship. And so I think you put it well, which is that in the bubble of that car and in the intimacy of their friendship, they are working through what this transition means to their relationship, but it is still a very safe space. But the reality is, we were also, they were wanting to go into NBA games and dive bars and, racetracks, in the middle of the country. And once you start to kind of break out of that bubble, you do start to face some of the unfortunate hatred. I will say that the bulk of what we found, face to face, day to day, was mostly love and acceptance. I think we learned, and you hear the phrase, it's hard to hate up close. And I think that is really true. But we were also tracking online that, of course, when you're with Will Ferrell and you're stopping off in small towns, people start writing and tweeting and posting. And that, unfortunately, is where a lot of the unfortunate hatred that does exist out there towards the trans community, it exists. And I think it would feel disingenuous if the film didn't acknowledge it, but also if Will and Harper didn't. I mean, they were along the way learning and seeing some of these tweets, and obviously they had an interaction with a governor in Indiana that they weren't expecting. So that was the real reason was, look, let's be clear and honest, traveling across the country with Will Ferrell and the camera crew is not perfectly emblematic of the average trans experience. It's a little different. We try to, counter that where we could. But it also comes with added, exposure. More people are watching and looking at you in a way because you're with Will Ferrell. And I didn't want to shy away from that inside the structure of the film. So it's a balance, it was definitely a balance that we had to find as in the edit.
I think that's such a great point that you're touching upon there as well, where a lot of the fear and hatred that comes across in discourse comes from dehumanizing people and not knowing anybody. And I think what this film does really beautifully is it really connects us to Harper as a person. And Rafi and Chris, I wanted to ask you both as producers, the ways in which you wanted to make sure that this story consistently felt like something very personal, not just for Will and traveling with his friend, but also for the audience to feel personally connected to Harper as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes along with the approach to the film, like filming in a car for 17 straight days with cameras that are right on the hood of the car. So it's, it's a pretty intimate space, and it's a pretty intimate shot. And, when the subjects forget that the camera is there, which, happened within the first couple days of this happening, they just get very real and very honest. And, so I think you're really getting to see the real people here, both Will and Harper. So, I think just really the approach to what this film was going to open that door in, kind of in a very unique way.
Yeah, and I think right now, especially, it's incredibly divisive. The world is incredibly divided, and also I feel like people are really dug in on their thoughts. And I feel like this approach and this idea of just going in through a friendship allows you to not stand on some, like as Josh said, it's not a political ambition at the beginning. It's to connect to people and to understand, and that's where conversations can happen in the car and in these spaces, as opposed to trying to just win a political fight, where it feels like that's very easy for people to shut off and tune out. And so I think that was constantly the ambition, was to have the conversation and to watch these friends have these conversations.
Yeah, and I would add one other thought, which is that we partnered with GLAAD, who was really helpful just in, being a partner in this film and looking at it and being a guiding light at times. And one of the things they told me, and I learned through a wonderful other documentary called Disclosure, which looks at, it's a Netflix film as well, but looks at how trans people are portrayed in the media. And there's a really sort of staggering stat, which is around 70% of people don't directly know a trans person. I think that stat's coming down, which is helpful. But therefore, what they know is through the media. And how has that been portrayed? And I think to us, we felt like, oh, for all those people, that's 70% of the population who doesn't know. And like you said, Mara, maybe feels like it's a scary other, an unknown. I don't know anyone. Like, well, now they know Harper. And Harper is lovely. She's funny. She's warm. She's hilarious. She's argues many times that she's funnier than Will Ferrell, and she may have a point at times, but it's just like, now someone, and look, she's not scary. She's wonderful. She's a human being who wants love and wants happiness and wants all these things that we all want. And I think that alone will make a huge impact, just for most audiences to get to know Harper. A lot of pressure on Harper's shoulders, as she jokes around about, to represent all of trans people, which she does not want to do. But I think that was certainly a big part of our hope in making this film.
And Josh and Rafi, I wanted to ask you both also just about the logistical elements that went into making a film like this, because very often if you're moving around to multiple locations in a documentary film, that's already a whole beast within itself. But this is also, we're actually filming them as they're driving, as they're on the road. All of a sudden they're pulling out their deck chairs and sitting in a Walmart parking lot, and we're capturing that. Now we're going into a dive bar in the middle of town. And so what were some of the really unique elements that came with logistically setting up and following a film like this on a road trip?
Yeah, well, I think that part of what allowed us to be able to do this, because it was pretty complex, is just having done so many docs together and in various situations. The first movie we did was very much, it's following little kids around, the best 7-year-old golfers in the world. And, there's a lot of things that you can't really plan for when you're following around little kids, so, and then kind of being in so many different situations and scenarios, over the last 15 years or whatever it's been of us making films. So I think that just gave us a confidence that we would know how to deal with anything that came up, but also gave us a lot of foresight in being able to plan out how to do something like this, because it's got the complexities of traveling across the country with one of the biggest actors on the planet. That's one thing, but also making sure that it was intimate, that it was also authentic, that it looked beautiful and big, but we did not want to have a big footprint anywhere that we went as well. So keeping everything really small and nimble, having the right equipment to be able to, film it in this scale, but also be able to be super duper mobile, that, things are happening that are completely unexpected. You know, we have to figure out where we're stopping each day, how far we can drive, how much we can shoot, you know, all of those things. So, I mean, there was a million different logistical things that, you know, played into doing this. And I think, you know, just having worked together so, you know, for so long and being in so many different scenarios just allowed us to, you know, be able to do that pretty smoothly.
Yeah. Yeah, well said. I think that the big point, I think what I'd underline that Rafi just said is like the trust in each other, but also we talked very quickly about keeping the crew as small as we possibly could. I'm just a fan of that in general. It feels more intimate for everyone involved. It's safe. You form a little family for 18 days. We had a wonderful little wrap party by the time we got to Los Angeles, and we all felt like we were very, very close. Yeah, I think the other thing I'll just add to that is, you know, trying to still like bring a cinematic language that feels appropriate for the subject matter. So, you know, we brought in a wonderful DP, Zoe White, and she had shot a little bit of documentary, but is a little bit more known in the narrative space. But she and I spoke at length about, you know, I obviously having a history with Will and Harper, I knew their relationship is gentle, it's soft, it's warm, and they show each other an incredible amount of grace. And so when you start putting those words out there, soft, warm, gentle, grace, you start then can translate that into, okay, our lenses, maybe we go with more vintage old lenses that have a soft feel and have aberrations. And oh, when we're moving around, I don't want it to feel like handheld and frenetic, because that's not the feeling of this conversation that's happening. So we chose to use a Steadicam, which was very difficult because we were shooting for long hours, you know, hours on end, and kudos to our incredible Steadicam operator. But so it always starts from that kind of creative point of view, and then how do we merge the creative ambition with the logistics of, and that again, having a lot of experience between us, we've been able to kind of problem solve that over the years. And you know, it didn't come without our hiccups and praying that Harper's car would start every morning, because every time she'd turn it over, I'd be like, oh no, it's not starting. So, you know, it's a wonderful Grand Cherokee, Grand Wagoneer, but whatever it is, 88 or something. But sometimes when it was cold, it wouldn't start. So.
No, I mean, I loved that sort of detail that it was like, we're in Harper's car, we're staying at the Comfort Inn, we're doing everything exactly as she would have road tripped herself.
Exactly. Yeah, which we were kind of waiting to see when Will was going to be like, "Are we staying in another Comfort Inn?" But he was down. He was in. At one point, it's not really in the film. Harper chose this amazing, like, what was it, guys? It was, I mean, it was on a beautiful Navajo sort of land, and they stayed in, you know, I'm blanking on the name, but essentially it's a hogan, which is essentially a mud hut with no running water, no electricity. The crew went to the hotel and we're like, well, see you guys. And it, you know, wound up on the cutting room floor as many, we had 215 hours of footage. So lots of things got cut, but Will was down. I think Harper was in her element, and Will found his element at some point along the way.
And Chris, for you, off the back of what Rafi was describing in terms of, you know, going back to your experience making the short game, where it's like you're really looking to the journey that these kids are on and letting the subjects of the film kind of almost tell you the idea of where the story is going, and looking at this film as well, where Harper and Will's relationship and their friendship really leads the journey of what we see on screen. I was just interested in working in the documentary field as a producer, how you kind of always go into projects with an outline and an idea of what a story is going to be, but the way that it's always this living, breathing entity where the subjects are telling you what it's going to be at the end of the day.
Completely. I mean, I think at the beginning, I feel like that's actually the journey of the edit too, is actually you've experienced it, but you have these preconceived notions of what the film was maybe when you started. And the early cuts, I think, are a little bit of the skeletons of what you thought the film was. And as the film gets better, it's actually you getting closer to the truth of what you actually experienced and what the actual story that revealed itself. And sometimes it comes down to almost as literal as you look at a scene and you go, why is this scene not working? And you go and you just find out, you're like, well, that's because it's not the authentic version of what actually happened. What actually happened was this. We just have to find the clearest way to tell that story. But it's actually always about trying to find what the story is telling you. And that's actually when the film starts to work.
I love that. And Josh, in terms of talking about the edit on this, I mean, you had over 200 hours worth of footage from this 17-day road trip. And, you know, there's also moments where there are some archival pieces from the SNL archives, where we see some really great behind the scenes pieces. We see sketches that were on air, you know, and again, there's the voices from the media landscape as well. And so I was just interested in what did that starting point look like in terms of going through the footage, but then finding what are the supplemental elements that it feels like this film needs to tell a really rounded story.
Yeah, yeah, it was as you mentioned, it was a lot of footage, and a lot of wonderful footage, and so it was a, sort of an embarrassment of riches in that sense. I think our first cut was 5 hours long. I was like, this is pretty good. It was not, but there was a lot of good stuff inside of that. But um, yeah, working with our amazing editor Monique Zawitowski, we just started to whittle it down. I think the breakthrough for me was at one point. I think one of the challenges of the film is Will and Harper are very funny. Their love language is comedy and laughter. I love the expression, laughter is the shortest distance between two people. I'm a big believer in that. And I think that is how, that's certainly how Will and Harper connect. And that's how I wanted our audience to connect to the film and kind of have a way in. That said, too much just laughter and joy and just, oh, it's just jokes is not really what the film ultimately is about. And I think early on, I was struggling a little bit to find that balance and that tone. And I finally realized, oh, let's strip out all of the comedy because they're constantly funny. They're constantly making jokes. In any given scene, they were always really, really funny. And so we just stripped all that out and started to put the building blocks of the actual kind of dramatic story of the growth and process and development of their relationship, as well as the unfolding of Harper's story and her backstory and how she came to this realization of wanting to transition at 59 years old and sharing that with Will, who did not know all of the details, obviously, prior. And once we had that framework of, okay, this is the story, then it was very easy to sort of make decisions as to when to add in all of their jokes and their laughter, because they innately kind of will start with a joke, then get into a serious conversation, and then when it gets too serious, they pull back to a joke. That's just the way, and I think that's the way a lot of us operate. So that was, I think, the primary challenge and balance of the edit. And then, as you mentioned, yeah, pulling in other archival pieces, obviously, always fun to do that. I mean, it is primarily a film that is, which I was excited about, is back in straight verite mode. We lean on the archival early on just to sort of set up the long history of their relationship. But I think once we hit the road, we're pretty much in real time verite, which to me, having made both verite and archival films, docs, I love them both, but there's nothing that beats the power of really great verite. You are in that car, you are in those moments. And it just pulls you in a way like nothing else. So I was very excited to kind of return to a verite doc on this one.
It's wonderful. And it's such a great point as well that there's a lot in the film that comes up through these conversations between the two of them that even Will wasn't aware of. And I feel like one of those key things is the fact that Harper shares several diary entries from over the years where she was writing about her feelings and a lot of her more challenging moments and struggles. And I was just interested in, for all of you, the conversations that led to Harper including those in the film, because I think it's such an incredibly vulnerable thing to do on screen.
Yeah. I mean, I think that is she's, as you can see in the film, she's incredibly brave and willing to be vulnerable in front of not just Will, her close friend, but in front of us and the cameras. That the journals came about, or her diaries came about. I think, Rafa, you may remember, but it's like we went and filmed at her house to start. And I think she had mentioned in passing that she had these journals, but I had never seen. And she had them. And while we were starting our road trip, because we started the whole process at her house, I think she said, hey, I might, I have these journals. And she said, I might bring them along the way. I said, that would be great. And it just became a very organic thing where she brought them. And then at the right time, when she felt comfortable, decided to share some of her entries. And they are a beautiful window into, how she was feeling. And again, it's fascinating to see someone like Harper, who's transitioning at 59, the feelings she was grappling with of gender dysmorphia and not really knowing what was going on with her started decades prior. And so I think that was really helpful for anyone involved to realize, like, I don't know, this isn't like you wake up one morning and you feel different. It's like, no, this is something she's been grappling with her entire life. and had been kind of like shutting down. And so it was incredibly brave for her to open up and share those passages with Will, of course, through the journey.
And for both of you, Rafi and Chris, I feel like this is such a full circle moment for the two of you in terms of creating this film. We were talking about The Short Game earlier, which was one of your earlier films together, that you sold to Netflix. That was their first acquisition and kind of really set the slate of their documentary world. And you're working with them now on this. What does it mean to you to reflect and look back on the journey of having made that film and now being in this place and telling a story like this and continuing to work with them in a very different way?
Yeah, well, I have to say, at the time, it was not an obvious move for us to, you know, take this shot with Netflix. I think that was like 2013. And, we premiered the movie, The Short Game, at South by Southwest, and there was a lot of interest in the movie, and from like, bigger theatrical players that wanted to, pump it out into theaters, etc. But there was something that we really loved about being the first at Netflix. And, obviously House of Cards was out and it was a massive success. And we loved the people who worked there. Actually, Adam, who was there, I think he was just starting at the time, who's now their head of docs there. We just felt like these were really smart people. They had an incredible vision for where the entertainment, the whole business was going. And, we ended up going with them. We're very happy, obviously now in hindsight, incredibly happy that we did, but we're also very happy, just to see the reach that this film got right off the bat. And now, we've done some things with them in the meantime. Actually, we had a series with them called The Playbook that came out a few years ago. But, we've been in each other's orbits quite a bit since. But now to fully, return with this movie and where Netflix is at, that, this movie will be in front of 260 million or, whatever their numbers are now. Their reach is, just unbelievable. It's astronomical. And I think that was part of the idea of this film, was we wanted this to be seen by as many people around the world as possible, because we think that it's something that is important for people to see, obviously very enjoyable too. But that was our biggest thing. It's just like, the more people that see this, the better. And, obviously we could not have ended up at a better place. And again, it's like a family type scenario too, just because we've known them, I guess, longer than any other doc people have known them, because we were the first people in there.
Was that the same experience for you, Chris?
Yeah, well said. I don't think I could add any more. I think it's a film we're incredibly proud of. And I think being able to put it out in this massive way, and with all the support that Netflix puts behind their films, and this one specifically, we're just proud and excited for it to be it.
I love that. And lastly, Josh, I wanted to ask you about the song that Kristen Wiig wrote for Will and Harper as a theme tune to their road trip, because it plays over the credit sequence. She finally submits it to them. And what I love is it kicks off with a comedic line, and then it actually becomes this really beautiful, touching story. She throws in the jazz element halfway through that they requested, so it fits the remit. But I was just interested in how that came about and how you feel like that was the perfect way to surmise the film at the end.
Yeah, I mean, that's the brilliance of Kristen Wiig. We of course are very close friends. We made Barb and Star go to Vista Del Mar together, which, again, keeping in the family, was produced by none other than Will Ferrell and Jessica Elbaum, who all are obviously very involved in this movie. So no, it's just such a joy. I know she's just very talented, as you can see, as a musician, but I think, she struck the exact right tone of what I feel like the film needed to end on. It is funny, but it is very, very sweet, and it's a beautiful song. And she's got a beautiful voice and can play the ukulele, and there's nothing Kristen Wiig can't do. I think one of my favorite moments of after finishing it all, I was like, maybe we should film you playing it. So I drove over to her house with my iPhone and brought a saxophone. She does not play the saxophone, even though it looks like she does in the song. And we were filming all of this at once, just laughing in her backyard. And I think Kristen had the idea. She's like, "Oh, we should get like a blow dryer and like blow my hair in the wind." And I think I was like, "Oh, yeah, maybe. Do you have a leaf blower?" And just at that moment, her husband came home and he's like, "I have a leaf blower." So at one moment, I'm just, I'm shooting a leaf blower at Kristen Wiig's face as she's fake playing the saxophone, and I was like, "This is a perfect kind of end of this beautiful, but and silly at times, but also very heartfelt and very kind of close family, intimate. She's been friends with Will and Harper for decades, and so it felt like a nice fitting end. And it really, as you saw in the film, it really, I don't know, it leaves you with that lasting feeling that I certainly felt all along the way experiencing that road trip, and I think hopefully translates to audiences will feel along the way of being on the road trip via the film. So, yeah, the amazing Kristen Wiig.
I love that. And I think it's such a special film. So congratulations on this. And thank you so much for talking about it. I appreciate it so much.
Of
Thanks for
course.
having us, Mara.
Thanks for having us.